Lillian Harrow thought she was safe in the quiet village of Ashford. Geoffrey Baines, the friendly postman, waved to neighbours and delivered mail with a smile. But beneath that familiar routine hid a chilling obsession, and a secret so dark it stayed buried for 16 years. When Lillian vanished without a trace in 1996, no one imagined the truth would be hidden under floorboards, captured in Polaroids, and marked by fingerprints that didn't belong to either of them. Now, with one suspect dead and another still unknown, the haunting mystery of what really happened to Lillian is far from over. In the spring of 1996, the village of Ashford, tucked away in the English countryside, experienced something it had never known before: fear. Life in Ashford was quiet and predictable. People knew their neighbours. Children played in open fields. The only sounds at night were the distant hoots of owls and the rustling of leaves. That all changed when Lillian Harrow vanished. She was a 29-year-old schoolteacher, beloved by her students and respected by her peers. Polite, punctual, and peaceful, no one could imagine her being involved in anything dangerous. On a Friday evening in April, she left the school at her usual time, said goodbye to a colleague, and walked the short distance to her home. She was never seen again. When she didn't show up for class the next Monday, people grew concerned. Her students were confused, and her absence was reported to the police that afternoon. Officers went to her cottage, a small brick house on the edge of the village. Everything inside was undisturbed. Her handbag was by the door. Her shoes were neatly placed on the mat, and a half-prepared meal sat cold on the kitchen counter. The television remote was on the couch, and her bedroom light was still on. Her car was in the driveway. There were no signs of forced entry, no smashed windows or broken locks. It was as if she had been lifted out of her life without making a sound. Local search efforts began that evening. Volunteers and police combed the woods, fields, and surrounding farmland. They searched the riverbanks, wells, and abandoned barns. Dogs were brought in. Helicopters scanned the fields from above. No evidence turned up. Not a footprint. Not a trace of blood. Not a single clue. The media arrived briefly, capturing images of the small village under the grip of a mystery. Reporters spoke to her co-workers, her sister and neighbours. All said the same thing. Lillian had no enemies, no troubled relationships, and no reason to leave. Detectives questioned residents, retraced her last known movements, and reviewed her phone records. Nothing was out of place. There were no suspicious calls or strange visitors. Her bank accounts remained untouched. Her passport was in her drawer. Her cat had not been fed, a detail that deeply disturbed her sister, who said Lillian loved the animal like her own child. Days turned to weeks, and hope began to dim. Posters with her photo faded in the sun. Candlelight vigils turned quiet. Eventually, the investigation ran out of leads, and the case went cold. The village returned to its stillness, but it was not the same. The shadow of what happened to Lillian Harrow lingered in the back of everyone's mind. Ashford was no longer just a peaceful village. It was a place where someone could disappear without a trace, where fear could settle in a home and never leave, where a young woman walked home one evening and simply vanished. 16 years after Lillian Harrow's disappearance, the village of Ashford had grown quieter, almost forgetful. Time had softened the tragedy in people's minds. Her cottage had long been sold, her belongings scattered or packed away, and the school where she once taught had been turned into a community centre. For many, the mystery had faded into village folklore, a sad story with no ending. But that quiet came to a sudden end in the summer of 2012, when new owners began restoring an old farmhouse on the village's outskirts. Hidden beneath layers of dust and time was something no one expected to find. The discovery came during a routine renovation. A floorboard in one of the bedrooms was loose, and when workers pried it open, they found a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. At first glance, it looked like old trash or forgotten papers. But when one of the workers unwrapped the cloth, he uncovered a stack of handwritten letters, yellowed with age but still readable. Each one was signed by Lillian Harrow. The homeowners immediately contacted the authorities. Forensic teams arrived, carefully examining the letters, preserving them as evidence. There were over a dozen in total, dated between November 1995 and April 1996, the months leading up to Lillian's disappearance. They were all addressed to someone identified only as M. Police couldn't determine who M was. No one from the original investigation remembered the name, but the content of the letters changed everything. In the earliest letters, Lillian expressed mild unease. She wrote about noticing small changes around her house. Curtains she didn't remember opening, lights left on she was sure she'd turned off, her mailbox left hanging open. She wondered if she was being forgetful, or if perhaps someone was playing tricks on her. Over time, her tone darkened. She began to believe someone was entering her home while she was away. She mentioned a man she kept seeing around the village, always in the background, never speaking, never close enough to identify. She didn't know his name. She didn't know where he came from, but she believed he was following her. One letter read, "I came home today and the mirror had been turned to face the wall. I never touch it. I don't even look into it anymore. I think he does it. I don't know why. Maybe so I don't see him behind me." Another ended with the chilling line, "I've started locking my bedroom door at night. I still hear the floor creak sometimes." The final letter was dated April 12, 1996, one day before she vanished. It was short and rushed, the handwriting uneven. In it, Lillian wrote, "If anything happens to me, it's not suicide. It's not an accident. Tell them to check under the floor in the schoolhouse." That single sentence reignited an investigation that had been buried for over a decade. The village that had nearly forgotten Lillian Harrow was suddenly forced to remember her. And now there was something new, evidence, a warning, a voice, reaching out from the past. The tip from Lillian's final letter led investigators to the place she had once worked, the old schoolhouse in the centre of Ashford. Though it no longer echoed with the sounds of children, the building remained intact, now serving as a quiet community centre, used mostly for local meetings and small events. Her former classroom, once filled with blackboards and bookcases, was now a vacant room with dusty wooden floors and peeling paint. The clue had been ignored in the original investigation, as no one had seen the letter until now. But this time, detectives took her words seriously. With permission from local authorities, forensic teams removed floorboards from the spot near what had been Lillian's desk. The boards creaked as they lifted them one by one, exposing a shallow cavity filled with dust and cobwebs. Hidden within was a small rusted biscuit tin. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, were 4 Polaroid photographs. The first 3 showed something deeply unsettling. Lillian, asleep in her bed. The images had been taken at night, with flash, from a close distance. She looked peaceful, unaware, but someone had clearly entered her home and stood right beside her while she slept. The 4th photo was different. It was a shot of her bedroom mirror. In the corner of the reflection was a blurry figure, partially obscured by shadow. Though faint, the outline of a face and shoulder could be seen. It was clear that the person taking the photo had accidentally captured themselves in the mirror. Experts enhanced the image using updated technology, slowly clarifying the face, When the process was complete, investigators were stunned by the result. The man in the reflection was Jeffrey Baines, the village postman at the time Lillian disappeared. Baines had never been considered a suspect. He was well liked, quiet, and known to everyone. At the time he was in his 50s and had worked the same delivery route for years. People trusted him. He lived alone, had no known family, and never caused trouble. His death in 2007 had been unremarkable. He passed in his sleep, buried without fanfare. But now, 5 years after his death, he was the center of a reopened investigation. Detectives began examining every piece of evidence related to Baines. They searched his former home, now vacant and owned by the council. What they found inside sent chills through the team. In his attic, behind a false wall, they uncovered a small hidden space. It was dusty and dark, but inside were several items wrapped in cloth and plastic. Among them were a woman's scarf, earrings, a locket, and a single high-heeled shoe. One of the items matched a description Lillian's sister had given police back in 1996. DNA testing confirmed the objects had belonged to at least 3 different women. One of them was Lillian Harrow. The evidence suggested that Jeffrey Baines had not only been stalking Lillian, but had likely broken into her home repeatedly. He had been close enough to photograph her in her most vulnerable state. And now, long after his death, the truth was beginning to rise from beneath layers of time, dust, and silence. The discovery inside Jeffrey Baines's attic shocked the entire village. The hidden compartment was narrow, poorly built, and only accessible by crawling behind insulation and exposed beams. Yet inside, it contained personal items clearly belonging to women, some modern, some decades old. Each item was carefully wrapped and preserved as if they were trophies. Investigators catalogued everything: a pair of worn gloves, a broken necklace, a scarf with delicate embroidery, and a diary belonging to an unknown woman. The level of detail and care suggested a disturbing obsession, one that had gone unnoticed for years. What made the find more chilling was the realization that no one had ever suspected Baines. He had delivered mail with a smile, waved to neighbors, and chatted with schoolchildren. He lived alone in a small red brick house on the edge of town, kept his lawn neat, and rarely made headlines. There was no criminal record, no known complaints, no family to visit or question. Yet behind that ordinary life, he had hidden something sinister, something that may have extended far beyond Lillian Harrow. Detectives began digging through archives, trying to connect the other items to unsolved cases or missing persons. 2. Objects were traced back to women who had disappeared from nearby villages in the 1980s. One case had been ruled a runaway, the other a suspected suicide, but neither woman was ever found. Now those disappearances were being reconsidered in a new light. If Baines had been active for that long, the full scope of his crimes could be much larger than anyone imagined. Inside the attic, police also found an old camera, dusty but intact. It contained a roll of undeveloped film. When processed, the images were deeply disturbing. Many were blurry or overexposed, but a few clearly showed the inside of women's bedrooms, clothing laid out, on beds and doorways captured from strange angles. It appeared that Baines had been documenting his intrusions, possibly for years. There were even shots of Lillian's cottage, taken from the woods behind her home. One photo showed her through a window, reading on her couch, unaware of the lens, watching her. Despite all this, one thing remained missing: Lillian herself. Her body was never recovered. No burial site was discovered. Forensic teams searched every inch of Baines's property and surrounding land, even using ground-penetrating radar. Nothing turned up. It was as though she had vanished into thin air. This lack of resolution only deepened the mystery. If Baines had taken her, where had he kept her? And why leave behind letters suggesting she feared more than one person? As investigators reviewed the letters again, subtle clues began to stand out. Lillian had never named Baines directly. She referred to someone outside her window, but also hinted that others didn't believe her. One passage read, "He's always there, but the others laugh. They think I'm overreacting, but I know what I feel. I'm not alone." This line puzzled detectives. Was there someone else involved? Could Baines have had help? Or was there someone else lurking in the shadows, unnoticed, just like him? The case, which once seemed nearly solved, was now beginning to unravel in a new and unexpected direction. In 2018, 6 years after the rediscovery of Lillian Harrow's letters and the shocking evidence tied to Jeffrey Baines, the case took an even darker turn. Advances in forensic technology allowed specialists to re-examine the Polaroid photographs found beneath the schoolhouse floor. While it was already confirmed that Baines had taken the photos, technicians decided to run a new scan for fingerprints. What they found stunned the entire investigative team. The prints on the photographs didn't belong to just one person. There were 2 distinct sets. One matched Baines, but the other set belonged to someone who had never been identified. The second set of fingerprints wasn't in any criminal database. They weren't from any known suspect, police officer, or family member. It was someone entirely unknown, suggesting that Baines hadn't acted alone. This revelation reopened the investigation yet again, but this time it was more than a hunt for a forgotten predator. Now, police were searching for someone still out there, someone who had helped or at least witnessed what had happened to Lillian. The discovery ignited panic in Ashford. For years, villagers had accepted the belief that the threat had died with Baines, but if someone else had been involved, if someone had been in Lillian's house with him, or perhaps even helped hide her, then that person might still be walking freely among them. Rumors spread quickly. Some believed it was a former police officer who'd buried evidence. Others whispered about a retired teacher, a neighbor, even another postal worker. No one could be ruled out. The investigation turned up a few promising leads. A delivery driver who worked alongside Baines in the 90s had abruptly moved away in 1997, just a year after Lillian disappeared. Police tracked him down and questioned him, but he denied any involvement. His prints didn't match. Another man, a carpenter who had once repaired Lillian's fence, had reportedly shown an unusual interest in her, but his records were clean, and he had died in a car crash in 2003. Investigators dug deeper into village records, old school staff files, utility service logs, anyone who might have had regular access to Lillian's life. Still, the unknown fingerprint remained a haunting presence. It was as though the second person had never existed. No trace, no evidence, no mistakes, except for the touch left on a photograph buried for 16 years. Even more disturbing was the possibility that the second person had planted the letters or preserved the evidence, intending for it to be found. Had someone been trying to guide the investigation all along? Was it guilt? A game? A warning? To this day, Lillian Harrow's body has never been found. The case remains open, her disappearance now linked to multiple cold cases across the region. The man believed to be responsible died without facing justice, but the fingerprint, silent, small, and undeniable, continues to haunt the investigators and the village alike. It's a reminder that someone else was there, someone who watched, someone who may still be watching. And until that person is found, the full truth of what happened to Lillian Harrow remains locked in shadows.